It is definitely my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker. Dave Wermeister has been affiliated with the Boys and Girls Club of Toledo for more than 50 years. I keep trying to do the math on this because, Dave, you don't look a day over 40, so I'm not sure how that's possible. But it might have something to do with the fact that he started as a club member prior to beginning his career with the staff of the Boys and Girls Club of Toledo in 1973. Currently, Dave serves as the executive director. I have had the honor of working with Dave for about 10 years serving on the board, and I can tell you that there is no single person more dedicated to the work they do than Dave. The Boys and Girls Club of Toledo has a bold vision. Success is within reach for every child. They believe every boy and girl deserves a safe place to learn and grow, ongoing relationships with caring adult professionals, life-enhancing programs, character development experiences, and hope and opportunity for the future. I don't think any of us can argue with that vision. So I guess it is no wonder that Dave and his staff are so passionate about the clubs. Please join me in welcoming Dave Wermeister, Executive Director, Boys and Girls Club of Toledo.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank all of you for being here. And on behalf of the members, staff, and board of the Boys and Girls Club, thank you so much for all that you do to support our mission. More importantly, thank you for what you do for this community. It was several years ago that I spoke here last, and since that time, you all have helped us renovate our swimming pool and get it painted, and in that pool, thousands of kids have learned to swim. We've got new gym lights, LED lights that are saving our operating budget, and we can now see everything in the gym, so thank you for that. Games room equipment at our South Toledo Boys and Girls Club, at the Carson Family Club, at Marshall Elementary was in part due to a grant from this club, so thank you for that. And our bus that you helped us buy in 2001 is still running and on the streets. So thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for my Kiwanians in the audience and our many board members and friends. Please ask your tough questions and any heckling. I'd appreciate it if you'd hold on to that until the end. When Judy called me and asked me to give an update on the Boys and Girls Club, I said I would do that, and she gave me some choices on dates, open dates that you had, and I chose the December date because it's such a special time at the Boys and Girls Club, and it's special to all of us who've been there for many years, and I know that we have some of you who are affiliated with us and are donors or board members, or some of you are even second-generation board members. The history of the club goes back, and I'm going to start there and share some of that history with you. Boyville to Boys and Girls Clubs, over a 125-year history of John Gunkel's legacy. The more I discover about the history of Toledo, the more I'm amazed of the people who gave their lives and lived their lives in such a way that they had a tremendous impact on our community. And not only our community, but our nation. John Gunkel was one of those individuals who, by the way that he lived his life, had a profound impact on its history. And I think we can all aspire that what he did in his lifetime continues to make a difference 103 years after his death. This presentation will guide us through some history and early days of Toledo, but of course the Boys and Girls Club. And it starts with Mr. Gunkel coming to Toledo for the same reasons that many others came to Toledo. He wanted to get rich. He saw a fortune here in Toledo. Similar to men like Jessup Scott, he believed Toledo was the future great city of the world. And Gunkel saw a city that had enormous potential, but what he had not yet found what that potential was. And he spent several years trying to find his way in our community. And he sold real estate for a few years, and then he took a job with the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railroad. And this is where he worked as a ticket agent and then later was promoted as a passenger agent. And his downtown office provided him a window into the world of young boys living on the streets selling newspapers. Not surprising, these newsboys were disruptive to society, often relying on crime to survive. And I quote Mr. Gunkel, It need not be told that our newsboys, as a general rule, as people have known them, are regarded as swearing, stealing, lying, dishonest lot of young criminals, and those qualifications are recognition as adjuncts to their business. So Mr. Gunkel was perturbed at these kids, and he actually wrote about them that as he went to and from his office building, he noticed them on the street corners, and they were the kids that were shooting craps in the alley. They were smoking and they were swearing. They were catcalling and whistling at the pretty ladies when they walked down the downtown street corners. And Mr. Gunkel found that disturbing, and he stewed on it for many weeks and many months. Now you have to get a picture of Toledo at the time, at the turn of the late 19th century, was experiencing a bit of an arrested development. For years, the northwest quadrant of the state lagged behind the other areas of Ohio and the Midwest because of the swampy environment that we had here. The canals finally brought trade and commerce to the community and led to Toledo's incorporation in 1837. And early industries included manufacturing and farm wagons and bicycles. And that was key because, and I didn't know this until I did some of this research, in 1890, Toledo was the largest producer of bicycles in our country. In 1888, Edwin Drummond Libby was enticed to bring his New England Glass Company to Toledo. That company, later renamed the Libby Glass Company, would eventually produce 3 other major glass-related industries. At the same time, the bicycle and farm wagon companies began to develop what was known a new form of transportation, the horseless carriage. Workers, many of them immigrants, streamed into Toledo for jobs in these industries. And in just 30 years, between 1865 and 1895, the population of the city grew from 25,000 to over 130,000. And with this rapid growth rate came urban problems. There were very few social service agencies out there to help the destitute and the needy, except for a few churches. Life was particularly difficult for children, some who were orphaned during this time when their parents succumbed to epidemics of malaria or typhoid that frequently swept through the region. And with a very different view of child labor than we have today, many immigrant families relied on their children to support them. One of the largest employers of child labor was that glass industry, and with almost a quarter of their employees were children. Young boys performed some of the most dangerous and difficult tasks in the glass production business. Michael Owens, who would later become one of the great industrialists of our city history, grew up doing some of those dangerous type of work in the glass factories in West Virginia and experienced what would later influence him to develop methods of automating that glass manufacturing process to help end such practices for these kids. But those who couldn't find work in the factories often took to the streets selling newspapers, and that's where Mr. Gunkel came in. Their labor fueled the booming newspaper industry. While selling the papers for as little as a penny, these boys who were out on the street corners had to work morning to night in all kinds of weather if they hoped to feed their families, if they even had families. Because of the demands of their work, they could not afford the luxury of attending school. They became a close-knit group amongst themselves, often organizing into gangs to provide security and also a sense of belonging. Some of these newsboys would gather in John Gunkel's office in the Booty House to help stay warm during the winter months. He found many of them were born leaders to help organize the other boys in self-help groups, and Gunkel believed that this organization based on self-governance and guided by love of adults could help these boys develop into better men. Now, Gunkel was also motivated to desire to bring control over these unruly, social, disruptive group of young men. And it was on December 25th of 1892 that Gunkel invited the newsboys to come to a Christmas dinner at the Marine Building that was located at Water Street and Madison Avenue. 102 of those boys attended that dinner. Some of the unruly boys started fights. There were 6 fights worthy of notice, he wrote. But he was smart enough to have 6 police officer friends there with him to help for security and safety reasons. One of them dressed as Santa Claus. The other helped with entertainment. And in between the entertainment, Mr. Gunkel influenced the boys with speeches about proper behavior, values, and how young men were supposed to behave in the downtown street corners. Gunkel wrote of that Christmas gathering in his book, Boyville, in 1905, that in a half hour, the tables were cleared of everything that looked good to eat. Not only were their pockets filled with apples and oranges, but their shirt waists and pant legs bulged with the things that pleased them the most. Most of the boys who attended that Christmas dinner, following Gunkel's suggestion of creating a Newsboys Association based on the principles of responsibility, self-governance, and a chance for a better life. Gunkel was elected president by the boys, and a newsboy by the name of Jimmy was elected vice president. In 1908, 500 newsboys served as official guides to the city during the Grand Army of the Republic's Civil War Veterans Encampment in Toledo. And also that year, John Gunkel started a campaign to raise $100,000 to build a permanent home for the Newsboys Association. Boy, times have changed. $100,000 to build a brand new building. That building was located at 618 Superior Street and was dedicated in 1911, had a 350-seat lecture hall, a 1,200-seat auditorium, a swimming pool, a billiard room, a gymnasium, a library, and a huge kitchen. The building was so much of part of Toledo that it was depicted on picture postcards that you could send home to loved ones when you visited the city. Members were issued membership cards which stated an active member for life in the Boyville Newsboys Association. He does not approve of swearing, lying, stealing, gambling, drinking intoxicant liquors, or smoking cigarettes, and it is entitled to all benefits set of the association, and has the respect and esteem of the public. So these cards were a coveted piece. The kids were proud to have them, and the kids joined in numbers. Infraction of any rules were investigated and members punished accordingly. In 1912, the association appointed a probation officer to work with the Toledo juvenile court system. The officers could not arrest the violators, but they issued warnings if they saw bad behavior. And we still have the original court docket books at the Boyville court. Those referrals and infractions would come back to the club, and the kids would have to go through a process with the Boyville court, and they may have suspension of their membership card, or they may have chores to do and things like that. And it's just hysterical, the things that they were cited for in that turn of the century. Even our mayor, Bran Whitlock, claimed at that time, and I quote, "You can lose your pocketbook on the streets of Toledo, and if a newsboy finds it, you will get it back the very next day." Gunkel became so busy in running the Newsboys Association that he gave up his job with the railroad to devote full-time to the kids. And through this, the book that he wrote, in selling that book and giving lectures, he promoted the club to national audiences and encouraged other cities to create Newsboys Association. He was publicly interviewed, and it was sent across newspapers across the country. And because of that, he was invited to address the National Association of Managers of Newspaper Circulation at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. He gave a presentation, and on August 16th, the day after that, the National Newsboys Association was formed at that fair, and John Gunkel was named the National Newsboys Association president. And by 1913, the national organization grew to 28,000 members in over 200 cities across the country. It was in 1929, flash forward a little bit, that some of Gunkel's original newsboys came back, and they were so indebted to Mr. Gunkel that they came to the club and they wanted to give something back, and they asked what they could do. And their response was, "Do what Mr. Gunkel has done for you." So they created the old Newsboys Association. Some of you may have purchased a newspaper just last Friday. They still are in operation, and they are continuing to raise money on the first Friday of December. And they are totally a 100% charity, and they are buying coats, hats, gloves, shoes for kids, needy kids who need them, just like Mr. Gunkel had originally done for them. Now, I'm going to fast forward because they gave me 20 minutes to talk about this, and we grew during the recession, the Depression years, and through the 50s, and it wasn't until the women's rights movement in the late 60s and early 70s that fueled the desire for many young girls, sisters of the boys who were coming to our club, that they wanted equal access. In fact, I'll share a local story because I was part of it. I was working as an instructor at our South Toledo club, and the Lopez family, Loopy, Lee, and Danny were everyday kids. They were there from the time we opened until the time we closed. And their sisters did not come to the club, though. They couldn't come in because it was a boys' club. We only had one restroom, one locker room, one shower facility. And so Anita Lopez, our county auditor, and her sisters used to come and sit on the front stoop of the club. And they would be there all day while their brothers were inside and we were working with them. And they would play hopscotch and foursquare and a number of games outside, but couldn't come in, although they tried, and they tried to sneak in all the time. But Anita and her family were very, very smart. And she came down one day with a tray, a catering tray of homemade Mexican food, tamales, enchiladas, tacos, you name it. It was just a beautiful spread. And she said, my mom made some food for the boys, and we have to take it in to give them their lunch. And she said there probably will be leftover for the staff if you allow us in to give this lunch to our brothers. And so for the rest of the summer, we all gained weight. And Anita and her sisters all came into the club. But that was the small start of what started the girls to come to Boys and Girls Club. The club went on a national campaign, our capital campaign, to raise money to renovate our facilities. And lo and behold, we announced that we were going into the service of boys and girls, and over 3,000 girls enthusiastically signed up. And I have some board members in the audience that can probably tell you some backstories how that met with some reaction with our board. But the organization is a much better place, and we were on the forefront of that movement. It went nationally. Clubs in Detroit and Los Angeles had court cases that went to the Supreme Court that were forced clubs to serve both boys and girls. We did it about 10 years before most of the nation did here in Toledo. Let me switch to fast forwarding again. In recent years, the clubs has formed a successful partnership with Toledo Public Schools to build Boys and Girls Clubs right in the school buildings. We've done this in Sherman School in North Toledo, the Carson Family Boys and Girls Club in South Toledo at Marshall Elementary, and the east side, on the east side at East Broadway Elementary School. These new facilities have it replaced our outdated buildings that were deemed functionally obsolete and are still providing seamless transition. When the school bell rings at 3 o'clock, we have kids immediately into the clubs and engaged in programs. In addition, we did some major renovation at the Homer Hannum Boys and Girls Club at the corner of Monroe and Detroit. And together, these new facilities will continue to serve club members decades to come. Our mission is still much the same as Mr. Gunkel's was from that first Christmas gathering that he had. Our mission calls us to enable all young people, especially those who need us most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring citizens and responsible citizens of our community. Activities are still program-centered and building-based. Those who participate are still called members, and membership cards are a proud asset to have. Children are treated with respect and dignity, and they will still have the right to make their own choices. Of course, we have help from caring adult role models there. Today, we serve more than 5,600 members between the ages of 7 and 18 years. Average daily attendance is nearly 500. Right today, it was 486 members each day. And we do our program initiatives are based mission-based and delivery through what we call Formula for Impact. And our priority outcomes are academic success, helping kids to graduate from high school ready for college, trade school, military, or employment. We provide good character and citizen programs, which are helping them to be engaged citizens and involved in the community, to register to vote, and to model good character. And of course, healthy lifestyles, to adapt a healthy diet, practice healthy lifestyles in making choices, and also a lifelong commitment to fitness. Now, in addition to local programs to recognize outstanding members, the Boys and Girls Club of Toledo have also, I'm going to go back one slide, there we go. We have been also fortunate to have members recognized by state and national Boys and Girls Club organizations. The young man on the left is Keontae Jones, and in 2016, Keontae was named the Midwest Regional Youth of the Year for Boys and Girls Club of America. Keontae is a Carson scholar. He's going to school on a scholarship from the Boys and Girls Club. He's at Grambling State University. He's a sophomore. He's due to be in town tonight for Christmas break, and I'm hoping to see him tomorrow. He also plays on the baseball team. And Keontae's backstory is that he wanted a brother or sister to play with at home. He has an older sister, but she was moved out by the time he was 8 years old. And Mom was in the kitchen cooking, and Keontae saw one of those commercials where you could adopt a child from Africa if you sent enough money. And he got in his mom's purse and got her credit card out and got the phone out and called and started the adoption process to get a little brother to play with. Mom came in and stopped him and said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "We're going down to the Boys and Girls Club where you can have lots of brothers and sisters to play with." Keontae became an everyday kid and found his mentor at the Boys and Girls Club, one of his camp counselors who encouraged him to become a Silver Laker, to swim to the island and back. And it took years of training for Keontae, but he did that, and he to this day says that counselor helped him realize that anything in life worth getting is not going to be easy. The young lady on the right is Maisha Hicks. I had Maisha here some years ago when she was our National Youth of the Year for Boys and Girls Club of America. Maisha's life today would be much different if it weren't for the Boys and Girls Club. Maisha, contemplating suicide on her walk home from school, had a method and a plan to do it that night. Had it not been for the director of the club out on the steps while she was walking by, encouraged her to come in with her friends to play a game of air hockey that we were going to do that day. Mike Conabear got Maisha to come into the club that day, and it wasn't until almost 8 years later did she confide that suicide was going to happen that night. Today, I'm happy to tell you that Maisha lives with her husband and 2 daughters in Indianapolis, where she is a successful doctor of podiatry. She has her own practice there and doing very well. Since that time, the Boys and Girls Club of Toledo, Ohio Youth of the Year winners, we've had 7 of them get their start right here in Toledo, and we're quite proud of that. One of Gunkel's quotes that still rings true today is it not true that many a bad boy is bad because the best part of him was never developed? From Mr. Gunkel's humble beginnings, the Boys and Girls Club of Toledo continues to be the largest and longest-standing youth service organization in the community. We are one of the 53 founding organizations that now make up over 4,300 clubs of Boys and Girls Club of America, which together we serve over 4.3 million youth. Later this week, we will carry on the 127th annual club Christmas party at Imagination Station for nearly 1,200 youth. And we are doing it over 2 nights so that we can get everybody in there and have a fun time and do that. And just like on that first party. We're not going to stuff their knickers or their pant waist, but every child still gets a goodie bag, and we still have those traditional pieces that Uncle put in there. The kids are all getting an apple, an orange, a candy cane, and a bag of peanuts. So we are very proud to continue that great lineage. The impact that the club has had on the life of our members is truly life-altering. I joined the South Toledo Club at age 10 with friends to have a little fun. It changed my life, and it saved my life. I believe that the Boys and Girls Clubs is the greatest secular mission in our nation today. Where there is poverty and despair, the club provides hope and opportunity. Every day in Toledo, more than 480 kids make a conscious choice to come through the doors of the Boys and Girls Club. And like me, they didn't realize it at the time, but we are helping them change their attitude, their aptitude, their behavior, to put them on the road to success and potentially to be a leader in our community. What you're seeing is a depiction of John Gunkel's monument in Woodlawn Cemetery, and I'm moved every time that I visit it. Now, the quote that's on there happens to be my favorite quote out of the Boyville book, and I share it with the kids at the club, and I share it with my kids at least once a year at Christmas time. But what I'm really moved, if you go to that Woodlawn Cemetery and look at the bronze plate on his tomb, it reads, "There was a man sent from God whose name was John, a citizen without reproach, a friend without pretense, a philanthropist without display, and a Christian without hypocrisy." So I wish you, on behalf of the kids, the staff, and the board at the Boys and Girls Club, at first, thank you for listening to our story, but more importantly, thank you what you continue to do in the community, and our wish for you to have a very happy holiday and a Merry Christmas. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Time for questions.
Yes, 7 minutes, please. Yeah.
If anyone has a question for Dave, we do have a couple minutes. John.
Thanks for all the good that you do. Could you describe the typical profile of your average member, and also
Sure.
to what extent you coordinate any activities with, say, the Toledo Public School System and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts?
Yes. So typical, the one piece that I can tell you at our 4 clubs in the central city of Toledo that we draw from, those 5,600 plus kids, 98% of them are eligible for a free and reduced lunch. And Dr. Durant, who I thought I saw, yes, Dr. Durant is here, those kids are at poverty or below poverty in order to receive that. Most of them are coming from single-parent families. We're seeing more and more foster parent families that these kids are with. So life is not what I remember, a 2-parent household to go home to have a nice, healthy dinner. Last year at the Boys and Girls Club, we served just over 87,000 hot meals and healthy snacks for our kids, because kids don't have that at home. So that depicts the type of kids that we're serving. We are definitely serving those kids from the central city who need us most, and that's what our mission calls us to do. The programs and services that we do at the club after school range from homework help immediately after school so that those kids are prepared. Our goal, we cannot take the place of a teacher in the classroom, but we can reinforce what those teachers are doing. So we try to get the youngsters ready for school the next day. So Power Hour is what we call it at the club. It is our homework help assistance program. And then we have a number of goal-setting programs, the Carson Cadet program, the Educational Activities Center. We have athletic programs. We have a pool where we can teach swim lessons, arts and crafts. So I hope that answered your question. In addition, I would like to invite any and all of you I have a stack of business cards. If you're interested in doing this, please come up and take one. Email me, text me, call me. I'd be happy to set up a tour of the club. Having me speak to you is much more boring. And my wife said, please don't put those folks to sleep today. And just invite them to come down to the club, and I'll link you with one of our kids to walk through the club, and you can see and hear it firsthand from them what they like and what they do at the Boys and Girls Club. So, other questions?
So,
Oh, thank you.
thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much.